All right, we're live. Hey, folks, it's nice to be here talking with you on this live stream. I want to start off by summing up something important we were just exploring last week on the channel in the rate of change video. In all of the climate modeling, these last 5 years have been important, and that data hasn't been summarized in a big international facing high consensus picture. If we were on a worst case climate track, we would be expecting to see an increased rate of change in temperature and in carbon dioxide data. We looked at the data together, the real basic raw data, and the slopes look good. That might sound odd because you're probably aware emissions aren't going down yet, temperature is still going up, CO2 parts per million is still going up. And what we explored in that rate of change video, it doesn't contradict any of that. What we found evidence for is that we are still on the pathway to our most likely future, an RCP 4.5 future, which is a future worth living in. It's a future where there are challenges, but where there is hope and where what we do today to get ready, we are doing work that will impact people generations to come. It's probably not a shocker. I think about the future a lot. From when I was a kid, I would think about it as kind of kid who read a lot of Asimov, right? Going to school in the greater Chicago area, watching a lot of PBS, 90s and the 2000s, you would hear people talk about climate change. Kids now hear people talk a lot about climate change, and the messaging hasn't really changed very much. It's still presented like there are two options. It's apocalypse or we're going to stop it. The messaging is like that our goal is to stop climate change. We're going to stop climate change or we're going to be facing this apocalypse. Even today, there's still this big emphasis on mitigation, on reducing our production of greenhouse gases, on reducing our carbon footprint. And those aren't bad things. People have poured money into mitigation. Big donors have poured fortunes into it. Many caring individuals have made lifestyle changes, big and small, to contribute to mitigation. And it's not like a shocker, these mitigation efforts haven't been enough. I mean, how can they when governments and corporations have repeatedly dragged their feet, have greenwashed their numbers, have refused to do their part? Mitigation hasn't been enough. There's acknowledgement now, growing more evident every week from every sector, that we didn't stop climate change. We haven't stopped it. I mean, mitigation hasn't worked. So for people who all they have heard are these two options, you stop it or it's apocalypse. Logically, where are we going? Everyone who's been exposed to this public messaging is going to think we're heading for the end, right? And I'm sure you've seen it yourself. There's such an intense fatalistic energy in so many circles right now, especially online. There are many people who are really encouraging and involved in a big surge in doomsday culture. And it's easy to get caught up in it. It can look quite scientific. More and more, even more now than 6 months ago, you see people presenting like straight up end times theology wrapped in a science like blanket. They don't provide any data sources, they don't provide any scientific context, and they get a lot of traction, right? It's an interesting question is why do people like that? Why is it so attractive? Why is it so easy to be attracted to doomsday messaging? I think it helps if we take a step back and we realize that it's not just today. If we think back a little bit, if you remember 2012, like the Mayan apocalypse, right? We were going to run out of time. We were going to run off the Mayan calendar. That got pretty hilarious, but some people did get super caught up in it. Y2K, the year 2000, that was a big deal. People were really into it then. I think that's the biggest in my lifetime that the end times theology has like super taken over. Mike Eckhart, it's true. Peak oil, that was a big like end times thing. I have to say, I was like just still in high school in year 2000, but I knew a lot of people whose families were sure that Y2K was like really going to do it. It was really going to be societally collapsing. And I've heard a lot of people got really into the peak oil thing. Yeah. And, just like we had these non apocalypses, then those are just the big apocalypse years we've had recently. We're not even talking about like doom focused small communities and cults, right? How many doomsday cults have predicted the end of the world just in the last 20 years? It's not like a few people have lost everything from this thinking because of this attraction that we have to the end. And it's not all like a contemporary attraction. It's very deep in our culture. Doomsday fascination goes back many hundreds of years. I think that, just deep in there, people want to believe in a final day of judgment. They want to believe they're going to be there, that they're going to know who was right and who was wrong, and that they won't have to pay their utility bills anymore, right? It's easy. Doom is very easy. It's harder to live than it is to die. Doomsday messaging is easy. It tells you that there's a way out and you're going to know you were right. Doomsday messaging is attractive and it's very dangerous. I think the most dangerous part of the doomsday messaging is the way it pushes us towards dichotomous thinking, towards thinking that there are two and only two outcomes, that the future is split into the saved and the damned, into the pure and the impure, into stopping climate change and the apocalypse. The reality of life, we know, is that things are rarely so clear cut. There are rarely only two paths before us. When we think about climate, we need to think beyond mitigation. Mitigation is important. We do need to continue working on a societal level to reduce emissions. But this notion that our world will either stay the same or change completely beyond recognition, it's dangerous and it's false. When we get into climate resilience thinking, we have to start looking hard at that place in between. We have to start considering the range of outcomes we need to find and focus in on our most likely climate future. Now, when we look at climate science, we have to acknowledge the range of possible outcomes. It's not like a smooth range. Many of our planet systems, they do seem likely to have tipping points where at a certain place, patterns that were once stable, they shift into new states. We think many of these tipping points lie above 2 degrees of warming. There are real concerns in the climate community that the year we're in now, 2023, this could be a hot year. This could be like a year that will look like an approach of 2 degrees in many parts of the world. You may have heard me talk before about greed and fear, these factors that can influence financial markets. We all can acknowledge how quickly financial markets can change. On climate, this is likely to be a year we can't ignore, a year of frightening extremes, and a year that pushes policy change. Talking about the Arctic ice, the Antarctic, I saw a report. I was looking at the news before I came on here. It is at record lows, and we don't expect to see a recovery anytime soon in the sea ice. I think that when we look at the modeling, it's increasingly clear that even though we're on track in terms of temperature and CO2, we're like not on track for ice, right? I think that there are flaws in the water modeling, and that's one of the reasons why when we're looking at sea level rise modeling, I try to look at the higher end of the modeling within the RCP tracks. It seems to me pretty evident that sea level rise is going to come in a little worse than we might like it to, but that doesn't mean that we're going to have different inland effects than we expect, or that the Great Lakes will have different effects than we expect. And it still doesn't mean that we're going to be looking at like a 10-foot wall of water heading towards New York, like some people want to talk about sea level rise. Our concerns, Mike is writing in the chat there about feedback loops getting out of hand in an unpredictable way. There's a lot of like black swan stuff that can happen, right? But do we plan for a future where we have destructive black swan events? Like a meteor hits the earth, we're unable to successfully get an oil drilling team out there to blow it up, right? I think that we need to plan for the most likely future. I think that it's important if there is like an 80% shot of something, you focus most of your preparation towards that, right? And as we work to stay under the tipping point threshold, which is where we peg the climate forecasts on the RCP 4.5 pathway, we avoid those tipping points. Hopefully, we avoid these out of hand feedback loops that we're referencing in the chat, and we avoid the type of system collapse we see on the RCP 8.5 pathway. As we work to stay under that tipping point threshold, it's pretty clear that we need to change the way we live to find a sustainable path forward. We need to complete the energy transition by 2040 worldwide and start ramping down emissions instead of gradually bringing them up. They need to start coming down. And if you're on this channel checking out the climate forecasts, I hope you're thinking about what that's going to mean. I hope you don't have a mindset that you want to go find a safe place to go and live just like you live now. This is the thing about our climate reality. The way we live now, it's not working. The way we live now, this is the system that pushed us past mitigation. We live in a system that made mitigation impossible because we live in a system that never has enough. We live in a system that doesn't seem to respond very well to emotions more sophisticated than greed and fear. So we need to find a better way to live. And for most of us, that means thinking of the future in at least two main ways. And the first should be very practical. Because our most likely climate future has a lot of potential areas of opportunity, but it's no joke. I mean, we are going to experience significant changes to our local climates here in America. If you haven't checked out your state level forecast on the channel, you should. There are things for which we need to get ready. There are changes coming that we will weather much better with preparation. The first thing I'd recommend for your future is if you're not already in one, you got to get to a location with a halfway decent climate outlook, an outlook where resilience building is possible. And it's worth noting, I feel like I can't say it enough. Many, many places in the US, you're already in a good enough place. Seriously, the odds are pretty good. You're already in a place where your best bet is toughening up your systems where you are, building resilience where you are. The second way we should be thinking about the future, I would argue, is not thinking about a future where technology saves us, although it would be great if fusion comes online. That would be fantastic. I think we should be thinking about a future where we use less, where nothing saves us. I don't know that I think there's a future out there where it's 2050 and everyone on the planet has access to overnight shipping, right? I think that we may be getting over the peak on that. I'm very skeptical of anything I'm supposed to buy to save the planet. We're talking about geoengineering in the chat. Yes, let us not rely on geoengineering to save us. I mean, a worst case climate scenario, we are probably talking about resetting Earth conditions to a place where we are going to have a very bad time. Human species is not going to do well. It won't be so unlike other conditions in Earth's history. With some of the geoengineering stuff, we're talking about putting into place conditions that may be irreversible, that may not have any similarity to any other time in Earth's history. And we feel like we can control that. We obviously are not capable of controlling our current stuff. You know, this is the problem. We live in a world where we're told that we're going to be able to continue this path of infinite growth, where we're told there's going to be stuff we can buy to save the planet. We're encouraged to think about consumption as our identity, and much of what we see, much of what you see online in your newsfeed on your phone, it's to show you what to want, like it's to show you what to buy. Oh, we've got another folk on here. We got Salutations says, I'm seeing more folks in my rural area going back to old-timey business hours, like people are stepping back more. Um, if you want to share where you live, I'd be interested to hear about that. In rural Iowa, I am seeing shorter business hours where it seems like people have staffing. I know that there's big problems in many areas where people don't have staffing. In Ohio, oh man, I hope that you are in a good position in Ohio. Ohio has such beautiful soil, such beautiful water. It's such a tragedy, the poisoning that has happened in Ohio. I hope that you and your community are safe. But yeah, seeing more people stepping back a little bit, spending a little bit more time on life than on consumption is nice to see. I don't think that all of the staffing issues that people complain about nationwide are sorry, I'm laughing at the chat speaking about overnight shipping not being a thing. Oh my gosh. The supply chain breakdown, I need to like not get started. But it's like people I think are starting to get that we can't buy our way out of this situation. That we're increasingly aware that the things we really need are not always things we can buy. We need connection, we need purpose, we need community. For all of these things, we need time and energy more than we need money. And I'm glad to hear that you're in a good part of Ohio in the chat there. And I'm glad to hear that people in your area are starting to realize your value beyond what we can buy. And as anyone who's watching is thinking about building resilience, about moving into a future that's not dichotomous, that does offer a range of possibilities. I hope that you consider, other than land, other than location, all the most important things that'll be in your most likely future. They rely much more on the abilities and the relationships you develop than on anything that you can buy. I would advise you to start thinking about ways that you can slow it down now, ways to reduce your consumption now. You may find it helps you get more energy and time now so you can build relationships and skills if you reduce consumption now. And it's funny, in the chat, we're talking about Elon Musk and his desire to have everyone buy the EVs and battery storage. I think it's worth thinking about. For the price of one of those vehicles, you could secure a few acres of land in a destination area, right? You could plant it with trees, let it grow up as grasslands, leave it alone. And then 10 years later, there's going to be living things there. So life will be there when you need it. The future needs to be about life. And we're in an important window for saving life now. I have not a lot of land, but I do a lot to grow it up in native plants to try to enrich the habitat. And the way that you can see insect populations, diverse, interesting insect populations, diverse, interesting bird populations explode in a very small area. We're in such a beautiful window for increasing life, for preserving life. If we put our priorities there, instead of in buying new material things, including consumption of green energy and goods, maintaining a lousy current vehicle and investing in land and helping that live is a greener choice than buying a new vehicle. That's a better choice for your future emissions and for your current life. I want to live in a future that's different from our past. It's clear we're not going to mitigate our way out of this. It's very evident that our future isn't going to look like our past. It's not an option to keep it the same. We're not going to get there. So we need to change how we live. We need to deeply examine these questions for every one of us, thinking about how you want to live instead of how you've been taught to live. Think about what matters to you instead of what you've been told matters. These are issues where it can be very difficult to untangle your own desires and impulses from those that you have been sold. It's time to think, I think it's part of why doomsday messaging is so popular, right? If there's an end in sight, we don't need to ask these deep questions. We can just party till we die. We can consume until we die, until the end of the world. We don't need to figure out new ways to live. And that sounds good, right? Figuring out new ways to live sounds very hard. We're all in these systems, they're all so much bigger than we are. It would be easier to die than to fix them. The doom is easy, it's very easy. But if you live, and some of us, even in a worst case scenario, even if we miss RCP 4.5, and you can look at the low pop destinations video on the channel from a couple of weeks ago. That one has RCP 8.5 modeling as well. And it shows there are plenty of RCP 8.5 hardy destinations where people are going to make it. They're going to make it regardless. Some of us are going to live. So these hard questions, these questions about how to use less, about how to build a sustainable future, we're going to have to wrestle with them. The earlier we get started, the better. There are many ways in which we today are in a better position, a more comfortable position to do this work now. In the chat, we have Samuel talking about EVs are a practical solution for moving some commodities, but that this is an economic issue. Agree. I'm trying when I'm talking about EVs a few minutes ago, that they're like, I'm not trying to dump all over them. I think that the energy transition is important. I'm talking about your personal consumer choices. Oftentimes, maintaining what you have is going to be energetically lower than buying an electric vehicle. I think that as we see infrastructure start to change, as we see community level infrastructure, as we see state level infrastructure, we'll see more EVs. Hoping that we are going to get some lighter EVs. Has anyone here seen the stats from the Department of Transportation about how much more dangerous the EV crashes are expected to be? Because those batteries are extremely heavy. I didn't really think about it before, but each of those EV cars is going to be like 3 times heavier than a conventional car. And we really haven't caught up on the trauma capacity. Like our hospitals are already overburdened without these extremely heavy car collisions. Oh yeah, Mike, the Hummer EV is like 8,000 pounds. It's like almost to a truck regulation level. Ashley Quick, you suggest maybe we should think about increase in bike culture. Who wouldn't want to have a more livable, walkable, bikeable lifestyle instead of everyone has to buy their own $60,000 EV? I Oh, Gamma Ray Potatoes, you're back. Nice to see you again. Aptera is a much lighter and extremely efficient battery that can go up to 1,000 miles. I and Mike, you're asking about the Aptera. I think that I need to like look it up and learn about it. Aptera. I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna learn more about this. I That we're talking about transitions that are positive. And with all of these different ideas, it like comes back to systems, right? Like the way that we want to push society now on this like consumer model, on this subscription model, it's not actually moving us to a system where we're able to bike to work more easily from more locations, or where for more people a remote working or a hybrid working model allows them to commute less, to spend more of their movement energy on their life instead of their work, you know? We have to think about these things because some of us are going to make it. And fear and anger and doom, they're more attractive than hope. They can get more clicks from people. They can offer easier answers than trying to wrestle through issues like this. But just like the dichotomy many of us were taught as children, where we either fix the climate and keep it the same or we're doomed, these simple, easy answers, they're not completely accurate. We need to start moving into a more mature understanding that change is coming and that we need to find different ways to live in our most likely climate future. Stephanie Nelson, live below your means. I agree 100%. I think that, as Mike says, we need to respond to the fact that capitalism is trying to drive growth through more and more consumptions. Infinite growth is necessary for system function. That is not the system that's going to work for us as we develop a mature understanding of our climate future. If we want to be prepared as we move into this century of change, we need to hold on to hope because hope helps us reject the easy answers and it helps us avoid getting into a place where you're so desperate to self soothe that you just consume. And hope means thinking, there's all this possibility of black swans, there's this possibility of feedback loops, but hope means thinking, I might live and finding ways to build a future around that possibility instead of a future where you let yourself lie down and die. It's really hard. Letting yourself lay down and die, that can be very appealing. Giving up can be easier. Oh, the hopium. Stephanie, it's okay to mention that they call it hopium, but why not have hope when we can look at the evidence for CO2 curves and temperature curves, and they suggest that we're in a future that's we're going to have to survive. You're going to have to be a part of it. So why not get ready, right? I hope that we're moving into a future where it can be about life instead of about stuff. And when I talk about life, I'm talking about all life, not just our lives, not just about life as can be measured by profit. That we can move into a future where we think about planting and nurturing, not consumption, not to nurture rather than consume, to recognize that we're living in a world that wants to heal, that we're surrounded by living things that want to live. If you ever have this experience, it was transformative to me to be on less than an acre and see how much it can live. It's a huge situation. You can make an impact on hundreds and hundreds of living things at a small scale, and it's real. I hope we're together in this mindset. And whoever is watching, as I get ready for my future, I try to focus on identifying things that I actually want and like rather than what I'm told to want and like. And that can be hard. There's so many messages that keep us from listening to ourselves. There are so many messages that keep us from valuing things that you can't put into dollars easily. In the chat, Mike, yeah, he says open spaces and plants and animals and clean water all have value, but you can't really put it into dollars easily. And it's true. I think that we have to find the strength to value things that we don't have a system to value right now, because they're what we're really going to need, you know? When I think about what I actually want in life, they're often nurturing living things and relationships and skills, not consuming, not using. And I'm sure you've heard those words applied to yourself, that you're a consumer, that you're a user. These are normal words, but if you think about them, they're very ugly, right? Then they show us what our society thinks of us, of our role in society, and of our role in these systems. Just imagining, I like to imagine what kind of system would it be where we could refer to each other as nurturers, where we could think about that as your identity instead of what you use. I mean, we need to imagine these systems to every extent that we can. We got to turn away from the grind to focus on what matters so that we can move into a future where, for many of us, it's frightening to consider the possibility that there's a real possibility, though, that you might live. If you're with me here in North America, you need to face the music, even if it's hard to hear. You're probably going to live. We're going to have to watch. That's why it's so important we get ready. We need to help. Otherwise, you're going to have to watch and you're not going to be able to have anything to give. That's going to be harder than dying. We're probably going to live. All of us here, we need to get ready for our most likely climate future. We have practical concerns. We want to know what science says about where we should go and how we can prepare for change. But we also need to acknowledge the limitations of what science can tell us about these future conditions. So much is going to depend on the systems we put in place, on our ways of being, our ability to hit RCP 4.5, to hit the emissions pathway for our most likely future. It won't depend just on us and our individual actions. It'll depend on the systems we create and are creating. Our ability to continue to bring emissions down, to manage the society-wide energy transition. I mean, we're bending the arc there. There's hope. We have to focus more also on our ability to live in a way that honors the quality of life, thinking about life in terms of all living things. We need systems to support that. And to invent that, we really need to do what we can, all of us, to open up space in our own lives for it. I don't know where we're going to go. No one can know. We can look at our most likely climate future, but we have to create the society that'll fill that space. We have to start the systems that can fill that space, and it's going to start with using less. It's going to start with moving away from growth and moving towards quality. Getting ready, it's not just about building resilience on the ground or in your home or in your heart. It's also about building room to dream, to visualize possibilities. We need to do it together. We need to visualize together because there is hope. It's not an easy hope, it's a mature, realistic hope. It kind of sucks, but we can prepare for what's coming. Let's get ready. I want to get ready with you. And this is the last live stream that I want to do like this because I want to see you all more. I want to be able to talk to the people in this community. I want to hear what you're doing on the ground. I want to hear what you're thinking about. I think that we're in a different place. I think that we can get into a different place in this community, and I hope that we'll be able to talk with each other starting next month. I'm going to put some ideas out for like course type material where we can learn together as well as discuss. We'll see how it goes. Everyone who participated in the chat, thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and I hope everyone has a good night. We'll talk soon. Bye.